Dawn breaks over the Norman countryside in July 1944. Low fog clings to hedgerows shredded by weeks of artillery fire. Somewhere ahead, a German Panzer commander studies the field through binoculars, confident. For years his men had mocked the American tank they expected to face. Too tall, too thinly armored, easy prey for Panthers and Tigers built to dominate Europe's battlefields. Then the firing begins. A sharp crack slices through the morning air. Not the hollow thud they expect, but a fast, violent impact. Steel shrieks. A Panther's frontal plate ruptures. Inside, the crew has seconds. Smoke, fire, silence. The German commander lowers his binoculars slowly. This was not supposed to happen. Reports had dismissed the Sherman as inferior, a stopgap machine. Yet here, on broken French soil, something has changed. The American tank is no longer dying first. And as more columns advance, German confidence erodes with every burning wreck, forcing them to confront a question they had underestimated for too long. How did this weapon evolve into a threat they could no longer ignore? By the time American forces entered the European war in strength, Germany's armored reputation was already forged in fire. From the Blitzkrieg campaigns of 1939 and 1940, to the vast mechanized battles of the Eastern Front, German panzers had built an aura of technical superiority. Names like Panzer IV, Panther, and Tiger carried psychological weight. Their thick frontal armor, high-velocity guns, and disciplined crews shaped how enemies, and Germans themselves, understood armored warfare. Across the Atlantic, the United States faced a different reality. When war erupted in Europe, the U.S. Army possessed little modern combat experience and no heavy tank tradition. American doctrine emphasized reliability, mass production, and strategic mobility over individual battlefield dominance. Tanks were not meant to duel enemy armor head-on. That task, according to U.S. pre-war theory, belonged to tank destroyers. Tanks were designed to support infantry, exploit breakthroughs, and move fast. Out of this doctrine emerged the M4 Sherman. Introduced in 1942, the Sherman was not revolutionary. It was a balanced design. Medium armor, a 75mm gun optimized for high-explosive shells, and a gasoline engine that mechanics could maintain in the field. Its greatest strength lay beneath the steel. The Sherman was reliable. It could cross oceans, survive long marches, and be repaired quickly. American factories produced it in staggering numbers. By 1944, tens of thousands rolled off assembly lines, feeding an industrial pipeline Germany could not match. German observers noticed immediately and scoffed. To experienced Panzer crews, the Sherman appeared flawed. Its silhouette was tall. Its armor, though sloped in places, seemed thin compared to newer German designs. Early encounters in North Africa reinforced this perception. Panzer III and IV crews using long-barreled guns knocked out Shermans at range. Reports circulated through German units describing American tanks as numerous but vulnerable, effective only when protected by artillery or air power. The belief hardened into doctrine. German tank manuals and field intelligence emphasized engaging Shermans from the front, confident that Panthers and Tigers could penetrate them before the Americans could respond. The Sherman became shorthand for inferiority, a symbol of American industrial quantity over German engineering quality. But war does not freeze designs in time. As fighting intensified in 1943, especially in Tunisia and Italy, American crews learned fast. Losses were studied. After-action reports flowed back to Washington and Detroit. Engineers noted the limitations of the Wageningemossafut against thicker armor. Field commanders demanded changes, not just in steel, but in tactics, ammunition, and coordination. The Sherman began to evolve. By late 1943, improved variants appeared. The M4A1 and M4A3 featured better armor layouts and stronger engines. More importantly, a new weapon entered the turret. The 76mm gun, longer and faster, offered significantly improved armor penetration. When paired with high-velocity, armor-piercing ammunition, especially HVAP rounds, it transformed the Sherman's battlefield potential. This evolution coincided with Germany's own strategic strain. Panther tanks, though formidable, were rushed into service with mechanical weaknesses. Tigers were powerful but heavy, slow and expensive. Fuel shortages limited training and mobility. Replacement crews received less preparation than their predecessors. German industry, under relentless Allied bombing, struggled to keep pace. By the time Allied forces landed in Normandy in June 1944, the battlefield was no longer a simple comparison of armor thickness and gun caliber. It was a clash of systems. The Normandy hedgerows restricted visibility and engagement range, neutralizing some German advantages. Long-range gunnery mattered less when tanks appeared suddenly at close quarters. American units adapted quickly, coordinating Shermans with infantry, artillery, and fighter bombers. German crews, once hunters, increasingly found themselves reacting. German intelligence noticed the change. Reports from Panzer divisions in France and later in Belgium recorded unexpected losses, Panthers disabled by frontal hits. Tigers knocked out at angles once considered safe. The Sherman was no longer just surviving, it was killing. The mocking tone faded. What had been dismissed as an inferior machine was proving adaptable. Supported by doctrine and logistics, Germany could no longer counter effectively. And behind every steel engagement lay deeper forces, human decisions, tactical choices, and technological compromises that explain why this shift mattered far beyond a single gun or tank model. One angle lies with the men inside the steel. American Sherman crews were not elite by myth, but they were methodical. Training emphasized coordination, communication, and recovery under fire. Crews learned that survival depended less on armor thickness and more on awareness, knowing when to advance, when to withdraw, and how to fight as part of a combined team. Veterans passed down hard lessons. Never crest a ridge alone, never stop moving longer than necessary. Always call for support before pressing an advantage. German Panzer crews, by contrast, had long been trained to rely on technical dominance. Early war experience reinforced confidence in superior guns and armor, but by 1944, that confidence became brittle. Replacement crews arrived with fewer hours behind the gun. Losses mounted faster than experience could replace them. When Shermans began scoring kills previously thought impossible, the psychological shock was immediate. Familiar rules no longer applied. Another angle is tactical. The Sherman was never intended to fight alone, and by Normandy it rarely did. American doctrine increasingly emphasized combined arms. Tanks advanced with infantry riding hulls. Artillery observers moved forward with armored units. Radios, standard in every Sherman, allowed rapid coordination. A German Panther might outgun a Sherman in isolation, but isolation itself became rare. German tanks often fought defensively, dug in, waiting for targets. This worked until American units learned to suppress, flank, and overwhelm. Smoke shells blinded optics. Artillery forced movement. Airstrikes disrupted resupply. When Panthers repositioned, Shermans exploited mobility to close distance and attack from angles where German armor was weaker. Technology forms a third angle. The Sherman's reputation suffered from early war configurations, but its design allowed constant modification. Wet ammunition stowage reduced catastrophic fires. Improved optics enhanced target acquisition. The 70 mm gun, while still inferior on paper to the Panther's 75mm L70, closed the gap enough to matter, especially at the shorter ranges common in Western Europe. HVAP rounds, though limited in supply, could penetrate German frontal armor under the right conditions. German tanks, meanwhile, faced diminishing returns. The Panther's armor and gun were formidable, but its final drive remained fragile. Tigers required immense logistical support. Breakdowns immobilized vehicles before battle even began. A tank destroyed by mechanical failure counted the same as one destroyed by enemy fire. Leadership provides another lens. American commanders adapted faster than expected. Generals like Omar Bradley emphasized practicality over pride. If something failed, it was changed. Field modifications were encouraged. Tank units improvised solutions. Welded armor, added track links, altered formations, often without waiting for formal approval. German leadership, under pressure from Hitler's direct involvement, faced rigid constraints. Orders emphasized holding ground at all costs. Strategic withdrawals were delayed. Tanks were committed piecemeal, reducing their effectiveness. Even superior machines could not compensate for inflexible command structures. Finally, there is the enemy's perception. German crews did not suddenly believe the Sherman was better than their tanks, but belief shifted from contempt to caution. Reports from late 1944 describe American tanks as dangerous in numbers, unpredictable, and supported everywhere. The Sherman was no longer mocked. It was respected as part of a system that wore down German strength relentlessly. All these angles converged on a battlefield reality where assumptions failed and adaptation decided survival, setting the stage for moments when theory collapsed under fire. The turning point came not in a single battle, but in a series of encounters that unfolded as Allied forces pushed beyond Normandy and into open country. In August 1944, during Operation Cobra, American armored divisions broke through German lines south of St. Lo. For the first time in weeks, the hedgerows gave way to wider fields and roads. German Panzer units rushed to contain the breach. Panthers and Tigers were committed in strength, tasked with halting the American advance before it reached Brittany and threatened to encircle entire armies. Near the town of Avranches, Sherman units advanced under rolling artillery barrages. Smoke hung low. Visibility shifted by the minute. German tanks took up hull-down positions, confident in their frontal armor. The first exchanges followed expectations. Some Shermans burned, crews bailed out under fire. Medics ran forward, then the pattern broke. American tank commanders identified flanks and weak points. Using radios, they coordinated maneuvers in real time. One Sherman pinned a Panther with smoke and high-explosive fire, while another maneuvered wide. At close range, a 76mm gun fired HVAP. The round struck the Panther's side armor. Penetration. Internal explosion. The German tank stopped moving. This was repeated again and again. By September, during the fighting around Mons and later in the Lorraine campaign, German after-action reports noted something unsettling. Engagements that once favored German tanks were becoming unpredictable. Shermans closed distance aggressively, no longer hesitating. They accepted losses to gain position, knowing replacements would arrive. German crews, short on fuel and ammunition, could not. One of the most documented moments occurred during the Battle of Aricourt in September 1944. In heavy fog, elements of the U.S. 4th Armored Division faced the German 5th Panzer Army, equipped largely with Panthers. On paper, it was a mismatch. In reality, terrain and weather erased German advantages. Shermans appeared suddenly out of the mist. Engagement ranges collapsed to under 500 meters. American crews fired first. Panthers, struggling with visibility and coordination, were hit before they could react. Over several days, German armored losses mounted into the dozens. American losses were comparatively light. German commanders were stunned. This was not a numerical ambush alone. It was tactical dominance achieved with a weapon they had long dismissed. As autumn turned to winter, the Ardennes offensive forced another confrontation. During the Battle of the Bulge, German tanks pushed through snow and forest, aiming for Antwerp. Again, Shermans met Panthers and Tigers. Again, results defied early war logic in villages like Bastogne and Saint. Fifth, American tanks fought defensively, using cover, ambush, and artillery coordination. German armor was destroyed at choke points, often by Shermans firing from concealed positions. By early 1945, German tank losses in the West were catastrophic. Panthers abandoned for lack of fuel. Tigers destroyed by combined arms before firing a decisive shot. The Sherman had not become invincible, but it had become lethal enough, often enough, to change outcomes. The realization spread through German ranks, quietly and grimly. The American weapon they had mocked was no longer just surviving the battlefield, it was shaping it. And as the guns fell silent in one sector after another, the consequences of that shift began to surface far beyond the wreckage itself. By the end of 1944, the evidence was no longer anecdotal. It was statistical. In the Western Front, German armored losses climbed faster than production could replace them. Panther output increased on paper, but mechanical attrition erased those gains. Allied intelligence reports documented entire companies reduced to immobile wrecks without ever engaging in decisive combat. Fuel shortages forced crews to abandon operational tanks. Spare parts failed to arrive. Training units were stripped to reinforce collapsing fronts. Against this backdrop, the Sherman's role became clearer. American armored divisions maintained momentum. Damaged tanks were recovered, repaired, and returned to action within days. Crews rotated, but units remained cohesive. Replacement vehicles arrived not in handfuls, but in convoys. Where German formations shrank, American ones regenerated. German reports from late 1944 and early 1945 reflect a change in language. Shermans were no longer described as crude or weak. They were described as numerous, well-coordinated, and supported by overwhelming fire. Panzer commanders emphasized avoidance rather than engagement, recommending ambushes or withdrawals instead of direct confrontation. Casualty figures underline the shift. In battles like Aricourt, German armored losses exceeded 70 tanks, the majority Panthers, while American losses remained comparatively low. During the Ardennes, Germany committed some of its last operational heavy tanks, only to lose them faster than they could be redeployed. Each destroyed vehicle represented not just steel, but irreplaceable crews and experience. The Sherman, meanwhile, continued evolving even as the war approached its end. Improved ammunition distribution, increased availability of HVAP rounds. Tactical manuals incorporated hard-earned lessons. Crews learned when to fight and when to disengage. Survivability improved not because the tank became impervious, but because the system around it functioned. German industry and doctrine could not match this adaptability. Centralized decision-making slowed innovation. Resources were diverted to increasingly complex designs that arrived too late and in too few numbers. Even when a German tank outperformed a Sherman in isolation, it rarely fought in isolation. The battlefield no longer allowed it. When Allied forces crossed the Rhine in March 1945, organized German armored resistance in the West was effectively broken. Shermans rolled through towns once defended by feared Panzer units. The mocking confidence that had surrounded early encounters was gone, replaced by resignation. The American weapon had not overturned German tanks through raw superiority. It had done something more decisive. It had endured. And in that endurance, supported by logistics, doctrine, and human adaptation, the balance of armored warfare in the West quietly shifted, leaving behind lessons that would outlast the war itself. In the history of armored warfare, legends often form around machines. Thicker armor, bigger guns, singular moments of destruction. But the story of the Sherman challenges that instinct. Germany did not lose its best tanks because the Sherman suddenly became superior steel. It lost them because war rewards systems more than symbols. The Sherman represented an idea that a weapon does not fight alone. It fights as part of an ecosystem shaped by industry, training, communication, and adaptability. For German crews, the realization came too late. Their confidence had been built on early victories and technical excellence, but war had moved on. When conditions changed, when ranges closed, when fuel vanished, and when coordination failed, superiority on paper no longer guaranteed survival. The battlefield punished rigidity. For American forces, the lesson was quieter but enduring. Losses were real. Sherman crews paid in blood. Yet each loss fed learning. Each failure produced change. The tank that was mocked in 1942 was not the same machine fighting in 1944, not because its soul changed, but because the people behind it did. In the end, the Sherman did not destroy Germany's best tanks by proving them inferior. It destroyed them by proving something else mattered more. That resilience, logistics, and human adaptation could outlast fearsome reputations. That wars are not won by perfection, but by persistence. And when the wrecks cooled across Europe, the lesson remained etched in steel. Underestimate a system at your own cost, because evolution, quietly and relentlessly, always arrives.